Hey guys, and welcome back to part 4 to What If Naruto Was Trained by the Nine-Tailed Fox and Became Female. If you want to know what happened last part, then I'll be linking in the description down below, which will take you to a place where you can watch the previous 3 parts and any other future part that gets added into this series. Now, without all the way, let's get into this. So, it would be somewhat continuing where we somewhat left off. Okay, so 2 weeks would go by from when they became a team, when Kakashi told them that they had passed. And while Kakashi had mainly focused on Sakura due to the fact that she was overall, weaker, slower, and had less chakra than, Sasuke, let alone Naruto. And so he somewhat focused more on her, mainly as both Sasuke and Naruto did tell Kakashi that they both do know the tree and water walking as well the next day, so that he knew that Sakura would have to be, taught those to catch up. And of course, he did, and it would somewhat be kind of at this moment as Kakashi and Sakura would be training, not training, more so sparring on the water, on the somewhat lake and training ground 7, whilst Naruto and Sasuke, they working as a team to defeat the shadow clone in which Kakashi gave them, but once they dispelled that, they then turned on one another and started sparring against themselves, which at least they were doing something, again, some amount of practicing, though Kakashi could tell that it's not at this rate. He wasn't exactly sure, but at the rate they were currently going, you'd eventually have to you'd have to probably teach them, maybe in the next couple of days, you'd have to start teaching them elemental ninjutsu, but not really wanting to do that at the very moment, due to the somewhat risk it can, not really risk, but mainly the fact that Sakura doesn't have nowhere near enough chakra yet, and because at least she should be having about mid, high gaining to low tuning level reserves to start learning elemental ninjutsu. And while obviously Naruto can easily, not easily, but the only downside for Naruto would be, just having to learn it. He's got more than enough chakra, and Sasuke really can already do fire ninjutsu, but somewhat likewise, he had enough chakra. Somewhat, he just had to learn to manipulate obviously the natures and find out its actual nature affinity, as it may not be fire. Anyway, from there though, Kakashi would decide that he'd have to start to push them harder, which would mean give them weights, and he'd kind of glance upwards to see how far it was until lunch, to which it would be exactly lunchtime. So he'd call he'd put his hand up before so that Sakura would obviously try and hit him, to which he wouldn't. She'd somewhat crack her head, and he'd proceed to call Naruto and Sasuke over, to which they would stop that spar and walk over as well, somewhat curious to know what they would be training in next. And Kakashi would somewhat tell them that pretty much they'd been making good progress, but it was time to somewhat take it up a level or two. They would ask Naruto he'd ask Naruto and Sasuke if they wore any weights, which Sasuke would shake his head no, to which Naruto, though, would not state that he does wear a bit of weights, and why, though he'd state that he hasn't got them obviously on right now. Yeah, so Kakashi to state that they'd be training in, or at least training with weights from now on, which would improve their speed, strength, stamina, and chakra reserves as well. They would sort of nod and he'd ask Naruto how much weight does he somewhat, or at least they'd tell Naruto to somewhat kind of double his weight, to which Naruto would then sort of say or at least tell him that he weighs about 50 kilograms, simply to not obviously strain his body and that, and that he could do somewhat more to it. Kakashi would momentarily somewhat think about tripling it, which he'd then shake his head and he'd just tell Naruto to do somewhat quadruple it or times it by 4. So instead of 50, he'd be around 200 kilograms. And from there he'd then tell Sasuke and Sakura that their weight would be that, or at least he'd get their weights after lunch, to which they'd sort of look up and they'd realise it was lunch, to which he'd then tell them that they were dismissed, as they would then leave to somewhat have lunch together. From there he would also, of course, he'd dispel in a swirl of leaves as he'd go to a shop to get some weight for them. An hour later, and Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto would return back to their training ground 7, to which of course Kakashi would already sort of be there. Well, with them though they would of course walk up to him, and Kakashi would somewhat ask Naruto if he now had the weight on, to which he'd nod, as he'd somewhat unzip his jacket, from which, well, no, he wouldn't even have to. He'd lift up his, well, no, he'd somewhat just point damage, to which Kakashi would see somewhat leg weights around his somewhat ankles, or at least above his ankles, and weights around his somewhat arms, and he'd also unzip his jacket, to which would reveal a somewhat chest weight as well. He'd nod, and from there he'd somewhat look over to Sasuke and Sakura, as he'd then hand Sasuke over 100 kilogram, or at least somewhat self weight, to which Sasuke would somewhat blink and he'd ask how comes it was that much, not nearing more so Naruto's, to which he'd somewhat state that he didn't for right now, that he didn't know how to somewhat use weight, or at least how to move on that in weights on that. Maybe once he does, he'd get heavier weights, but for right now, those be somewhat what he gets as it'd be tricky. That, and while Naruto's he's been training weights for probably some time now, and whilst it's been small, it's still more than enough to boost his strength, speed, and that. Sasuke would somewhat nod, and from that he'd give Sakura her weight, which would be half of Sasuke's 50 kilograms, and she'd nod, though she'd ask if it was potentially a bit too heavy, to which she'd probably state that it maybe would be, but that it wouldn't exactly be pushing it all that hard. And she'd sort of nod, and of course they'd put them on, and though Sasuke would sort of ask if he himself had weight on, to which Kakashi would nod, as he'd state that he has 300 kilograms on. And they would nod, and from there, once Sasuke and Sakura got their weights on, they would then ask what they would be doing, to which he'd say first a jog around to kind of get them used to moving with weights on. They'd nod, and they would sort of line up together, and Kakashi would say 3, 2, 1, go, though he and Naruto wouldn't actually move, as they would mainly turn their heads towards one another, more specifically Sasuke and Sakura, as Sasuke and Sakura were about to similarly, run off the line, and, due to the now some extra weight, instead of moving, they'd instead pretty much, fall face first, as, and, not putting in enough upwards force into their legs to get them to move. So their body went forward, but their legs did not. After all, when you somewhat walk, your pretty much body is constantly falling, though your legs are always catching you. Anyway, and so from there, though they would get them both somewhat up, though Kakashi would go, well, how about we try that again? This time from a walk to then more of a jog. Okay? Hi. Sakura would somewhat say embarrassed, and from there they would once more try once again, and about halfway through the lap, Sakura was of course somewhat heavily panting, or at least not exactly heavy, like really heavily, but she was starting to heavily pant, as well as sort of sweating. Sasuke was panting with a bit of sweat. Naruto was just on the cusp of panting, but wasn't even, sweating at all yet. Kakashi was kind of somewhat panting lightly, as he somewhat wondered if he put too much weight on, he's starting to somewhat wonder if maybe 200 would be enough for him, or maybe somewhere around the 250 to 275 mark, and oh well. Though they would continue somewhat onwards, and by the end of it, Sakura pretty much was pushing herself by that point, as her legs just couldn't really even feel her legs. Her legs just hurt like hell. And so did some of her lungs, and Sasuke was in the same ballpark. And Kakashi was heavily panting, whereas Naruto was also somewhat panting with a bit of sweat. And then from there, Kakashi somewhat tell them to stretch, to which they somewhat would, and after stretching, he'd give them a minute break. After that minute was up, they would then proceed to do push-ups, sit-ups, and all that, and that would go for 2 weeks again, which would of course be a month since they've been again in team. And and while about 2 to 3 days ago, Kakashi had actually upped their weights. So Sakura now had 75 kilograms, so up of 25, and he did that for kind of somewhat all of them. So Sasuke was now at 125, and Naruto at 225, and he himself was at 325. And though at the very moment Sakura would be sparring against him on the water, and Sasuke and Naruto were also sparring against one another, kind of on and off the water, so mixed surface, whilst also training on the side of trees, and that's how that spar pretty much occupied from, sending chakra to your feet to stay above water, to channeling chakra into your legs and your arms to get, a faster, harder punch, to then send chakra into your feet again to stay, on a somewhat surface, be it vertical or horizontal, so sideways or upside down. And though at the moment, of course, whilst he would somewhat redirect and or just dodge out of the way of Sakura's punches and that, and he'd throw his own as well as Sakura, he's sort of thinking that his team was maybe now ready for an actual C rank, as and that is the somewhat, granted they'd only done about 4 D ranks, 1 a week, but you could somewhat tell that the D ranks, they somewhat all seemingly, kind of somewhat agreed that it was more just a waste of time, and that them doing C ranks, while still slightly a waste of time, would give them, experience, out on the sort of field, as well as, and potential fast kills. And yeah, whilst he didn't obviously want to throw them directly into having their first kills, he did want them to, experience the outside somewhat wild, and yeah, and also working, to potentially, to somewhat protect a client and that. So a C-rank was definitely on the table, and yeah, he was just somewhat thinking kind of if they should do it right now or within a week. And so as you'd think, he would, continue to somewhat dodge Bowser's Saku's punches to, well, about a good somewhat 2 to 3 minutes later, as I could start to use somewhat panic lightly, as they had been going for about 10, somewhat 12 minutes now. And yeah, which was a good sign. Saku's, stamina was indeed increasing. And yeah, so he somewhat stopped, he'd put his hand up once more, which would stop Sakura, and did call Naruto and Sasuke over, to which they'd come over, and Kakashi would state that he'd ask them if they would like a C-rank mission, to which they would kind of momentarily look at one another before looking at him and simultaneously saying, yeah, we'd like a harder mission. And yeah, wasn't all that surprised, and he then asked them if they would like it today or maybe tomorrow or that, which they would somewhat at least they'd kind of ask why tomorrow, to which he'd tell them that a serum can last anywhere from a week to a month, though they would somewhat kind of look at one another and they'd talk slightly before asking if they could do it today, or at least starting today. And yeah, he would nod, and yeah, though he would tell them that before they go, they would have to, for one, take off the weight, and for another, have a somewhat shower, as they somewhat smell. They would just somewhat look at one another, and they would all suddenly somewhat nod and would seemingly perceive to fall through the water, as they would cut chakra from to their feet, falling straight through the water. To which Kakashi would somewhat just sigh, and of course he'd also somewhat get back into the proximity of him to its regaining. For now, though, they'd pull themselves up, and they would get some distance from one another, as they would then proceed to dump chakra throughout their entire body, pushing water out from them and the clothes. So they'd come back, and of course Kakashi would do the same thing. Well, push the water that had gotten onto him, off of him. And yeah, they'd go, how about now? To which Kakashi goes, you still are going to need to actually, have a somewhat quick shower or that, as you still very much do smell, though this smell is a lot less than before. They just nod, and yeah, though go on then, as he'd proceed to send over to the Hokage's office, or at least outside of it, as Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto would also send over, and Naruto disappearing in a swirl of leaves, with Sasuke and Sakura doing the same. Once they'd arrive there, of course Kakashi arriving first, Naruto second, Sasuke third, and then Sakura a second or so after, fourth. With about a second in between, or at least about a 2-second difference between Kakashi and Naruto, a second between Sasuke and Naruto, or Naruto and Sasuke, and about a 3-second gap between Sakura and Sasuke. And yeah, anyway, from there they would walk on in to the sort of, they would, walking into it, so and go, Team 7, here for your somewhat, here for a mission. So your customary D-rank mission, to which I should go, well, yes and no, Hokage-sama isn't quite an eyebrow like that. He wasn't. As he then asked, I'd like to request a C-rank, I would what I would like to request is though someone's Sakura slightly coughing. He's got right, sorry. We would like to request a C rank mission. Hokage-sama Kikashu say. Here's someone slightly quirking eye right at the re part, because it seemed like it was a team decision instead of, Kakashi believing that they were ready. And yeah, they'd probably still believe that they're ready if he's here. It's just they as a whole believed as well they were ready for a C ranking. Yeah, it was a mid something for a moment. And yeah, though, nowadays you'd go, well then, Kakashi, what type of... Well, Kage-sama, you can't be serious. They've only been, getting for a month now. You could, here's an off. Somewhat shouting. And, yeah, Kakashi's loudly somewhat signed. He's in... We'd would go, Iruka, trust me, something with this. With someone, when it comes to Kakashi, he wouldn't recklessly take a C rank just to be the first to take one. I can assure you that if you believe his team is ready, that his team is more than ready to take on a C rank mission. After all, it's not like they're going against Shinobi or that. Something plus, a C rank is more than overkill for Kakashi. So I can assure you that'd be perfectly fine. Iruka could grumble, though he would drop it, and Hiruzen would then pull out a list of C ranks as he'd read somewhat through them. He'd like, I believe this one would be somewhat a good starter. What do you think, Kakashi? As he'd hand the scroll over to Kakashi, to which he'd open it and he'd read it. And of course Hiruzen would state that it was a mission to the land of waves, to protect the bridge builder, to take it, it'd state that it was to protect the bridge builder to his homeland, and then wait until, he builds a bridge. So Kakashi would read it, nowadays he'd state that they would take it as he'd give the scroll over to Naruto, as Naruto would read it, and Sasuke and Sanka would also kind of crowd around Naruto reading it as well. And yeah, they would somewhat nod, and Hiruzen would ask, would call out to bring in the bridge builder, though whilst they wait, and once Naruto had finished reading the scroll, he would hand it back over to Kakashi, to which Naruto would then start Naruto would then state that that information would probably be the best. He'd state that I'd be in the front, Sensei, you'll be in the back, just in case, potentially, whilst this may only be a C rank, there's the potential of being attacked, and you'd be the best to do it from the to protect us from the rear. He'd nod and he'd go, Sasuke, can you, Sasuke, you'd be on the no, you'd be on the left side, and Sakura, you'd be on the my right side, on the down formation. They'd nod, though. Sakura would ask why, Sasuke would be on the left, to which Sasuke would state that, to give or at least from the throne kunai, more of a cap, to which he'd somewhat kind of be confused, to which he'd explain that you'd go, well, you and Naruto are both right-handed, which, while being on the right side, you'd be on both the right or the left side, and it wouldn't really matter, as there'd still be a gap between or at least, a gap in the air for when you and, Naruto throw the kunai. Though, if I'm on his right, because I'm left-handed, my Naruto's kunai are more likely to intercept one another, and, if we're thrown at the same target, that's not really a great thing. No, is it? Oh, right, so I kind of forgot you were left-handed. Yeah. Sasuke would somewhat kind of just like said that, and also it meant that not only technically besides really the actual kind of the person they're meant to protect could actually harm Naruto, as well, if he threw his kunai, he would have to directly turn towards Naruto to throw it at him, and likewise, same with Sakura, she'd have to aim it at Naruto, she'd have to throw it, she'd have to turn and throw it at Naruto for kunai to hit Naruto. And yeah. And well, yeah. So from there, and well, yeah. Though they would talk somewhat a bit more about some strategy in that, and yeah, though Kakashi would have a sort of bit of flashback to about a couple of days, but actually the sort of very next day, when he took his team on, was when he'd asked if they had any more potential secrets after Sasuke had explained that both he and Naruto could both do the tree and water walking, and yeah, to which Sasuke would shake his head and he'd look over to Naruto, to which would somewhat not state that he had about 3 secrets, or at least potentially 3, though he'd state Sasuke knew one of them, though he'd say though outside of a battle, 4 secrets, to which Sasuke knows both of them, though he'd state that battle wise maybe 2, maybe only 1, it depends on like if the secrets were that he held were kind of good enough in a way, like for aiding in the fight, and that maybe only really 1, maybe 2 of them were, and yeah, and that he'd tell them, of course, in time as his trust builds with them, either that or he would tell them in a circumstance where he would have to use one. So he'd nod at that, it's somewhat fine, that, people were going to have to, have secrets and that, and yeah. Anyway, though, about a second or so after that, Tazna, the bridge would of course walk in, somewhat definitely tipsy, and he'd, state what obviously within canon pretty much. And yeah, though Kakashi would step up defending his somewhat team and would state that his team was more than overkill for this mission. And yeah, and that he himself is a main elite jonin, and that he's more than somewhat overkill for a simple C rank. And yeah, Tazno would slightly tense up at that, but he'd also slightly relax as well. And yeah, Naruto would somewhat notice that and do so. The Fox would someone comment to Naruto that he seems to be hiding something, to which Naruto would agree and would go, so do you believe it's harder? Yes. To what degree I do not know, but definitely B rank. So keep on your guard. You may be facing enemy shinobi. And yeah, Naruto would go, well, it's good I'm in front then. Exactly. And yeah, from there though, so they would Kakashi tell them to meet up at the front. Well, he'd ask Tazna if it'd be fine if they somewhat leave today, to which he'd somewhat kind of nod, and he'd somewhat sigh, so he'd know he'd have to take Tazna to the hospital to have a medic and then detoxify him. And yeah, as a drunk person could indeed be could be the cause of why they would be attacked. Anyway, from there they would somewhat leave, but yeah, he would dismiss somewhat his team, and yeah, Naruto would dispel in a puff of smoke. Naruto and Sasuke would, Sasuke and Sakura would dispel in so as a leave, and yeah, Kazun would simply note that you taught them something, to which Kakashi would simply state that it was a very useful jutsu, to which Hizume just nodded, and from there Kakashi would leave with Tazuna. And an hour later, and Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura would be waiting for some Kakashi, as Kakashi would be slightly late, kind of due to Tazuna. Anyway, though somewhat whilst they'd wait, Naruto would somewhat kind of think over kind of somewhat what he had. So they knew, or at least they'd prepared for, of course, a month, as Kakashi had told them so. Though he did also have some that kind of emergency, somewhat hunting gear as well. And kind of survival gear, of course, a first aid kit. Yeah, all within somewhat his hip pouch. And yeah, though his current somewhat look was his current look was, well, sort of pretty much black, black shinobi sandals, then black form-fitting trousers. Yeah, as the looser, somewhat they were, the more likely they were to be, caught on maybe like a twigs, bushes, leaves and that, and create noise. So shinobis might be silent, so closer fitting somewhat you could get, the better overall you would be. And yeah, from there, a dark green kunai pouch and dark green hip pouch. To which, of course, kunai pouch, his kunai in there, and hip pouch, some shuriken, and from there, his jacket, a black and orange jacket, more so like his Shippuden era Shippuden era jacket would be sort of what he'd be currently wearing, of course downside to fit him. Yeah, and underneath that, either black, dark grey, dark green or dark red shirt. Yeah, and from there, his hit I-8 wrapped around his forehead. And yeah, though in somewhat, though his emergency hunting gear, and of course, consists of somewhat a few sharp knives, a few very sharp kunai, as well as also a sword. It was just a regular sword, as well he didn't really know how to use a sword, and once he'd thought about buying a katana when he'd went to buy the sword, or at least when he was thinking of getting the sword, but he'd figured that the katana would be more of a main weapon, while say the standard sword was more, it'd be decent enough for, to use, for maybe hunting when, they've lost all their supplies and that, potentially. And yeah, so that was all in his hip pouch, whereas the month-long stuff was in a backpack, and whereas he could seal it all within a somewhat storage squalid, it's just somewhat a bit more, slightly more hassle, and once they were, going to potentially, be fighting, some shinobi. Well, they also sort of had, Kakashi as well, so there was a chance that they may not even get involved with them potentially, and so yeah. Anyway, so from there, all is finally Kakashi would somewhat arrive, to which Sakura she'd simply state that you're late, and so to which Kakashi would simply point at Tazuna and go, because of him. And yeah, though Tazuna sort of grumbled, I need to say, what's the big deal about me not being how come I can't at least be slightly drunk or that. To which Kakashi would sort of sigh, and yeah, though Naruto to speak up, stating that the reason why he couldn't be intoxicated was because sort of on this mission he could be the very person that attracts danger to them, to which it'd be somewhat confused, and Kakashi would take it simply stating that whilst Konoha is generally safe and the area around Konoha is somewhat safe, it's not always safe, as there are bandits, rapists and all that waiting outside, and that they Plus, they generally don't come all that close to Kanha. Sometimes some do. But yeah, having a drunk person, sort of with them could be the difference between the mission being a success and them being attacked by some of the somewhat larger some of the somewhat larger being, maybe even a missing in or that. And yeah, he would somewhat kind of not that twice. He still didn't exactly know what drunk really played in, why he still couldn't be at least tipsy. It wasn't like he was going to shout. Maybe that was why. We didn't really know, but yeah. Though from there they would leave and somewhat, though as of course they would somewhat be walking, Sakura would, start talking with Tazuna, asking kind of, what was, rave like and that, and yeah. Of course, somewhat from there, Naruto wouldn't be paying really attention, mainly as his body was more kind of like a form of autopilot. Also, if anyone were to look at him dead on, they would notice his eyes were violet with a slit in the middle. Yeah. And they were, of course, somewhat which meant either one of two things. Either he was using some of the Fox's chakra, though barely anything, though that would more or less cause a slit to perform, his eyes and pulling anymore would turn red, so it wouldn't be that. The only other thing it could be would be that he and the fox were pretty much working in unison. The violent slit eyes just meant that Naruto and the fox were working in unison. In other words, pretty much that they were sharing control, meaning that if someone were to, come out of nowhere, either Naruto or the fox could, take full control and somewhat, get the body out of the way. And yeah. And, well, of course, at that moment, though, as I said, Naruto was in more of an autopilot, which would mean the fox was more or less in control. And yeah, the reason why was, well, because Naruto was using his somewhat chakra-centering abilities, more specifically his mind, his bloodline limit, the mind's eye of Kaguya, which would naturally use for sensing chakra. And yeah, as he'd somewhat mainly focus around them and a bit further out, make sure, no one is following them, and that, and occasionally doing about a mile to 2 miles ahead of them, which, whilst the mind's eye was very damn accurate, when you went out to obviously, something that large, people who could potentially be following you in shadows so close would kind of be lost, and unless they had a large chakra signature, you wouldn't necessarily notice until they were going to make that move, to which it then, warn the person, to danger was damn close by. And yeah, so from there, they'd carry on walking up until the point where somewhat Naruto would go, somewhat Kura, be ready, somewhat, why? Somewhat kind of up ahead, you'd presume, up ahead. To which Naruto would say, somewhat Shinobi, more than one, I'm not sure, maybe. Under a genjutsu. And yeah, even somewhat And the only other person that knew this mission was actually Hada, was Sasuke, as Naruto told him. Yeah, mainly there was no point in telling Sakurai she could potentially panic, as panic, and well, yeah, they didn't, he and Fox didn't exactly want Kashi to know, as, still wanted to obviously take the mission, as it just meant they'd potentially get more experience or witness what it meant to be a Jonin. And yeah. Anyway, so from there, they'd continue, and yeah. And of course, somewhat from there, they'd come across somewhat a paddle, to which Fox would amuse at it, Fox, so just somewhat, amused that it was indeed to Jonine. Well, not Jonine, but to Shinobi. And yeah, and of course, being so close now to it, somewhat, would someone immediately recognise, or at least potentially recognise, who they sort of were, as Kakashi had Naruto read the entire bingo book. Mainly so that he could, somewhat being, the strategist of the team, he'd, should be the one to, be able to, immediately, know whom they're fighting and, like, the best of the, plan of attack. Though Sasuke, asked if he should, as well, to which Kakashi, told him that it wasn't, and, he didn't have to, but he could. And so Sakura also somewhat helped out, and they all did read the 5, all 5, bingo books, as there is 5 hidden villages. So all 5 bingo books, and any other country that had a bingo book as well. So that, they knew what enemies, what, rogue shinobi to, potentially suspect. And, yeah, from there, as they'd walk past, the Fox would somewhat, mentally ask Naruto if it'd be, okay to fight, or if he, wanted, to continue with this link. That would say that he'd somewhat be fine. Yeah, and so from there, Naruto's eyes would lose their violetness, turning back to sort the normal bright blue in which his eyes generally are. And of course, the pupils would somewhat return back to their normal, somewhat circular shape. And yeah, from there, as Kakashi should somewhat walk past the paddle, he'd momentarily wonder if he should, pretend to, die and see how his team reacted. Though, as he'd slightly think about that, he'd shake his head. There was no point. He could, just in case, just in case it, he may have to interfere. He'd instead, something decide on Sunshine behind Tazna and simply telling that it was up to them. And yeah, and so of course a second or so later the team brothers would somewhat jump out. Kakashi, seeing them jump out at him, he'd immediately Sunshine behind Tazna, or in front more specifically of Tazna, of course, which would immediately cause him to stop, though they were already at the process of stopping when they heard the chains. And yeah, Kakashi then somewhat call out to his team that it was up, that he wouldn't be interfering with this, that, or at least it was down to them, and you'd only interfere if one of them were, had the chance of dying. They would just say hi, as they knew that it was a test, that this was more so, or at least Kakashi was using this as a test, and that his interference would generally either meant that he got, enough of how they may react, or whatever. Anyway, so from there, Naruto and Sasuke somewhat would step forward, nod at one another, while Sakura would stay close to the bridge builder, being the last line of defense. Yeah, while she somewhat slightly shook, and yeah, though Naruto and Sasuke would just look at one another and go, well, Sasuke, and Sasuke somewhat look at her and go, you'd somewhat crack somewhat eyebrow, and Naruto would go, well, let's see who can defeat their opponent first. Sasuke would go, well, you're on then. Yeah, Sakura, somewhat hearing that, would slightly shake her head, and Sasuke and Kakashi would also somewhat would also mentally shake his head. So it's like they would turn anything into a competition if they could. And yeah, so it's obviously they had a friendly rivalry, and so from there they would perceive to throw kunai each, something with the kunai intertwining with the chain and hitting deep within the tree. So the demon brothers would then detach the chains, and yeah. So just as Naruto would get close to his, he would shout out to Sasuke to not get hit as their gauntlets were poisoned. And yeah. And so from there they would fight, and well, yeah. Though as time would go by, Naruto and Sasuke would end up successfully actually getting them. Mainly Naruto after a bit would send chakra into his legs and his arms, increasing his overall speed seemingly massively, and seemingly momentarily disappearing and then reappearing seemingly behind the Demon Brothers and knocking his one out. Yeah, he once he did fall about killing him, means at the very least keep one alive to get information. Why were they attacking the bridge builder? And yeah, and from there, he'd look over, and Sasuke would also somewhat end up, or at least somewhat also knocking his one out a half a second later. From there, Kakashi would tell them, well done. And yeah, he'd tie the Demon Brothers up, though he would turn on Tazna and would demand to know why the Demon Brothers nuking of Land of Mist were after him. And yeah, he would somewhat threatened. Yeah, good. Indeed, somewhat. He'd then, try and kind of, he'd somewhat, and he'd explain to them, kind of somewhat what's happening, what was, actually kind of happening in, Land of Waves and that. And yeah, though when he'd finished, before he could even, start, potentially, obviously try and guilt trip them into, continuing, Naruto would completely cut him off, saying that he could have literally just told, his and the Hokage the truth, and that he would have, wouldn't have had, that. And well, yeah. And that even if he, does have, even if he didn't have enough money to actually pay for a, A rank mission, potentially A rank, he would still at the very least, you'd at the least, pay, installments, so much, a month once the mission was complete. But, now he's going to have to pay even more than that due to the fact of a mission upgrade and putting, us gaining in the line of danger. In danger that we initially didn't agree to. He'd gulp, and yeah, Kakashi would then look at his time and he'd ask them if they would like to, he'd look at Sakura and he'd ask if she'd like to continue the mission. To which she'd slightly gulp, and yeah, as she'd hope that, he'd kind of, ask Naruto and Sasuke first, though it seemed like Kakashi already knew their answer, and yeah, she'd go, well, Sakura, what is it? And she'd somewhat go, well, she'd somewhat taken a deep breath, letting it out slowly, calming her nerves down. She'd somewhat nod, and she'd state that they should, continue as, a country needed, a country needed rescuing, and it would look bad, on Konoha, they, team just left, to, have have Wave pretty much destroy, pretty much fall apart. Twitch Kakashi would nod, and he'd look over to the two boys, and he'd already knows what your answer, so they're continuing this. But as no Twitch would thank them, and yeah. And so from there, of course, they'd continue onwards and, onto the boat. After Kakashi did, question the Dean brothers, though they somewhat, though, knew, and Naruto had implied, obviously, I think it was Naruto, potentially, or Sasuke, like, it implied the A rank. This, Naruto. And, so Kakashi, well, Kakashi would sort of remember that, obviously, Dean brothers, followed, not Taza, followed, what was his name? I forgot his name now. Zabza. And so, mission was very much A rank now. And of course they would, get to the boat, they would, go over onto the, and they'd make their way, over to the Sonic Land of Waves, similarly like Naruto knew they would. Why? Well, because doing when they were waiting for, Taizuna to come in. And Iruka curious to similarly know like how far Naruto potentially, planned had. He would ask how they would, get over to, how they would, get over to the Land of Waves. Church Naruto would state that, Taizuna more than likely, instantly would go, well, Taizuna would, the bridge builder more than likely, came over somewhat by boat, and it was probably, somewhere, on the side, edge of the land of fire, so he'd more or less probably, walk us in that, direction of somewhere where the boat was more than, if not, well, then, somewhat we could always then, go to the, hospital or that and ask, for a stretcher, as then I could, make, for, shadow clones, as well, if Sensei were to do it, would be, in a more somewhat potential kind of dangerous situation to fight them. Since they can't exactly lose all that much chakra to its Kakashi would say, hey, I don't have that much. I still have more than, somewhat enough chakra now, and that would go, it's not exactly what I mean, Sensei. If we end up potentially, fighting, maybe, if this mission somehow involves B or A rank shinobi, then you're going to have to potentially, rely on that eye of yours, and, well, it'd put you in a more precarious situation if you're, if you've already used up some chakra doing, to potentially, Shadow Clone to carry the bridge builder across some of the, ocean due to, sending, from, doing water walking. And Kakashi slightly nod at that, and though Iruka goes, what about you? Wouldn't it fancy as well? To which that would go, I can make over 1,000 shadow clones from Iruka Sensei. I'm pretty sure 2 to 4 shadow clones worth of, somewhat chakra drain isn't going to do much. And in the grand scheme of things, to which, well, they would, that wasn't, obvious thing that one can make over 1,000 shadow clones. Four shadow clones weren't really much of a, damage damp onto, natural reserves. Plus you would get, whatever, chakra, that the cyclones had left back. So, he wasn't losing, all of it. More like maybe barely even, 1/4 of a shadow clone. How much chakra, required to perform, make a shadow clone. Anyway, from there, though because once they'd make it into land, they'd obviously continue onwards. And though Naruto and Fox had switched back to that 50-50 pretty much thing, and so Naruto would sort of be focusing sort of on his surroundings and that, and though the only thing the Fox could, or at least someone couldn't technically do, was speak, mainly due to the fact that if he did speak in the, when both he and Naruto were shut in control of the body, was that his voice would come out as a kind of mixture of both. It'd come out as contorted sort of sound, which, wouldn't exactly be good, as it would indicate to Sakura and Kakashi something wasn't exactly right with Naruto, and more particularly Kakashi, as it would indicate that Naruto may potentially be using his chakra, 9 times chakra. Anyway, from there though, somewhat Naruto would immediately similarly take full control of his eyes, go in something like bright blue circular eyes again, as he'd shout out behind us, though Kakashi, just as he'd say that, Kakashi would shout out, "Get down!" And they would all hit the floor, to which a sword would fly overhead, kind of hitting relatively deep into a tree. And from that, they'd get up, and Kakashi and Sakura would both similarly call out Tazna of the Zabza of the Hidden Mist Village. Well, at least Zabza, Demon of the Hidden Mist Village, a rank shinobi. And though from there, I forgot his name again, not Tazna. Zabza would somewhat quack it by that while it seemed, two of them knew, and of course they'd go, Kakashi Hatake, the copycat ninja. And their interaction would go similar, like in canon, up to the point where where you'd end up landing in between the somewhat team and the bridge builder, though, or at least as he was about somewhat similarly, as he'd appeared to seemingly swing down, Naruto would already be there and would cut his Zabza immediately off using a kunai. And he would take Zabza somewhat by surprised. How the hell did this Genin knew where he was? Not unless it was sensible, but even then the amount of chakra in the air was should block his sensing. And but if you could even sense through this, then didn't know about Haku, damn, you'd start think Haku'd been thinking was the brat potentially a sensor, though he shrugged it off as he could be all that good as he got relatively close. And anyway, though Naruto had tracked him for some time when they hit the land of waves. It was just that he wasn't exactly sure if he should he's sensing two people, so he wasn't necessarily sure if he should call the both out or just the one of them. And though as the one got closer and closer, he got stronger and stronger, to the point where just as Naruto call out, which was about tuning level, Kakashi called out to get down. And anyway, of course from there Kakashi then tell them that he'd be he'd sort of handle this fight where he already stated that. And so from there Kakashi and Zabza battle, and And of course, like in canon, a similar thing would go down where, though Naruto, just as he'd shout out to Kakashi to, finish Zabza off that he wasn't actually dead, Haku would, or at least the seemingly hunting in would end up taking the body and sensing the rain. Naruto would slightly somewhat curse under his voice, though Sakura would ask if, Zabza was indeed, actually dead, to which he'd shake his head, stating that Zabza, whilst Kakashi may say he was dead, he wasn't. He was probably in some type of death-like state or that, as his chakra wasn't, leaving him like it would when somebody was actually killed. And yeah, though as they get to Kakashi, he'd started, he'd somewhat say, let's continue, onwards to start, Taz in his house or that, before he'd end up, passing out. Whilst he, did grow in his chakra reserves did increase, it just meant he put more chakra into the water dragon. Yeah. Anyway. And yeah, from there, though they'd sort of arrive, and that's why I'm going to be ending this part here, guys. So if you have enjoyed this part, do tell me in the comments down below, guys. And hope you guys, girls, have a good day or night, depending on wherever you are and whenever you watch this. And well, just one more thing before I actually say bye. And that is, part 5 won't be Wednesday, mainly due to obviously some low viewership on potentially part 3, and obviously this part I'm going to be doing a different what if, probably 2 to 3 parts, just for give you guys a bit of a rest, so that when I do part 5 to this, you guys more something excited to see what happens and where it goes onward from this point on. And for those who are wondering when will Naruto be come female, again slightly later on in the what if, after the training exams, which will be hopefully within the next 2 to 3 parts, hopefully. Anyway, though with that now all out of the way, guys, good bye.